Y'all smell that? Football's right around the corner, baby. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another edition of IDP Plus Injuries. That's right. I'm your host here, DJ Doc, a.k.a. Sebastian Furon, and we have kicked off this NFL Injury Outlook series, and this is episode 2. So like I mentioned last week with the AFC East, we kicked off the NFL injuries. That is where I introduced myself. I explained all of this alphabet soup after my name. I told you I'm not going to do it again. Short synopsis: physical therapist, doctor in physical therapy for the United States Army, strength and conditioning, board certified orthopedic, blah, 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 blah. If you want to know about all that nerd stuff, that why I think I am credible enough to talk about injuries, you can listen to the first episode. And if you got any questions about the AFC East, Aaron Rodgers, Mike Williams, Bradley Chubb, guys like that, I encourage you to go ahead and check out that AFC East episode. That was episode 1. We kicked that off week 1. And this series, we are looking at the major NFL injuries, how they're going to shape the 2024 season. So we're talking about injuries that happened in 2023, big injuries that are going to be affecting this next season, because injuries play a huge role in the season and how your team outlook is going to be. So whether it's your team, whether you're looking at it for fantasy perspective, whether you're looking at it from a betting standpoint, I'm going to give you an outlook, a breakdown, each of the major injuries when we talk about the division. And the division for this week is, drumroll please, the AFC North, the big bad AFC North. Now, everyone who could just read the title, you probably already knew that. But hey, we're going to be talking about the AFC North. And just before we do that, man, I just got to say, as someone who loves football, I'm jacked up from the UFL. I don't know if you guys have been watching, but week 2 just, kicked off here, recording this Saturday night, and it's just got me itching ready for football, man. If you have not, man or lady, if you have not checked out the UFL, I encourage you to do so. Hey, I've got no ties to them, nothing like that. Just a guy who likes football, and it's exciting. It's good stuff. With them combining the leagues there, it's a lot better play because you got a lot, they went from 8 teams in just one league as opposed to 8 teams in 2 leagues. So you just think about the talent levels rising. The rules are pretty nice. The traditional kickoff, but they have it moved back a little bit. So the return game still plays a big factor there. Special teams, 64-yard game-winning field goal. Then the comebacks, instead of the onside kicks, you can do an onside, but you have the option of doing a 4th and 15 or 4th and 12 instead. And that's kind of your onside in the fourth quarter. San Antonio Brahmas just did it. They were down by 11 points with 1 minute to go. Usually you think the game was over. Not so fast, my friends. Executed everything to perfection and won the game outright. I'm telling you, it is a good time. Check it out. But you're right. Enough of that. Let's talk big leagues. Let's talk the National Football League. Like I said, it's going to be here before you know it. So we are going to be breaking down the biggest injuries. We're going to be talking about the injuries as far as I'm going to break it down of what the injury is first, and then we're going to get into the individual player situations, kind of how we see recovery timelines, things like that. What's their outlook as far as going into next season. So whether you are just looking for some information on your team, whether you're looking for fantasy football draft purposes, whether you just want to be overall knowledgeable as an NFL fan, or if you're coming at it from a betting standpoint, let me help you out here. So folks, we are going to go ahead and start off with the ACL tear. And we talked about this a good amount last time on the AFC East because it's just a super common injury, right? So to go into what is the ACL tear first, what is the ACL, right? So we're looking at your knee here. It's your anterior cruciate ligament, excuse me. It is one of your major stabilizing ligaments of the knee. So you can see here, it's the front of the knee. It prevents your tibia, which is that lower leg bone there. It prevents the tibia from going too far forward. Obviously, when it's torn, it just creates a ton of instability, which is why usually you see players fall immediately. That knee buckling is kind of a very key sign of what it is. It does require season-ending surgery because physical therapy rehab is not going to be able to repair your ligaments, unfortunately. If I was able to figure that out, I promise you I would not be podcasting. I'd be on a beach somewhere chilling because I would be absolutely set. But getting back to the ACL, so stabilizing ligament, you have to have surgery to repair it. Looking at recovery timeline, it's about 10 to 12 months typically. The research for a while, people were trying to get people back as quickly as possible because obviously that's typically, you want to get them back as soon as possible. But the research has really shown that if you return before 9 months, there's significant increase in re-injury risk. So definitely not sooner than 9 months. Typically, it's about 10 to 12 months where it's closer to that 11 and a half month really for return to play lines. Um, so that is your ACL tear. But as we talk about the ACL, we also need to talk about multi-ligament injury. So we got a couple guys who obviously I will denote when we go through them that are actually not just the ACL, but there's something called an unhappy triad that can happen with these knee injuries, and it is where the ACL, the medial meniscus, and the MCL. So over to the right side of the screen, your ACL, medial meniscus, MCL. Those are all injured together in what we kind of call an unhappy triad. That's typically what can happen, but really you can injure any and all of them. So it's just going to be a blanket multi-ligament injury. Basically, whenever there's something more than just the ACL injured, it typically delays that recovery time a little bit more, closer to that 11 and 12 months, more, close to maybe 13. You're kind of getting above really around that 12 to 13 mark. And again, it depends on what specifically injures how much. If we're talking about 2 ligaments, 3 ligaments, 4 ligaments, the whole thing. But just wanted to bring that to your attention too. We are going to have some guys that not just the ACL, and when it's common sense, right? When something more is involved than just one thing, probably going to delay that recovery timeline. And you would be right in your line of thinking there. All right. So first guy up. And like I talked about, folks, over here at IDP guys, IDP Plus, we don't just talk about the flashy, sexy players. We don't just focus on offense. We talk about defense and we talk about linemen because we talk about football here. And these guys, everyone is integral to a team's success. And the first guy really kind of embodies that. Jack Conklin there, offensive lineman for the Cleveland Browns. He unfortunately went down with an ACL and an MCL tear. He went down early in the season. Back in September is when he had his injury there for Conklin. Back on the 10th of September, really that first week, which is super unfortunate, except when it comes to recovery timelines, because that is going to help him as far as being able to be back, because he's playing with about 12 months of recovery time. So again, never great when you want to have an ACL tear, but at least it is to the point where he's going to have 12 months, so a full year to recover before the start of next season. So that does bode him well. ACL tears are really nasty for running backs and wide receivers. Quarterbacks tend to do a little bit well. Linemen do okay, because they're not as much relying as that side to side cutting ability. They're obviously a lot more in the trenches. He's probably going to play with a big old knee brace on, but Jack Conklin is, and not only is he a stud, he's the true definition of a hog on the offensive line, and he's got a good shot to be ready for the start of the season. Again, the full year of him being able to be ready to go, I think he's got a decent shot. Obviously, we're recording this here in early April, so it's something you want to monitor. But if we're projecting right now, I would say that Jack Conklin has a good shot at being able to return for the start of next season. Next guy up, we're going to head over to the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to, I meant to say it. I'm going to say it now. Disclaimer. This one's pretty gnarly. It's not the gnarliest of the ones I could show you, but it's the gnarliest one I am going to show you. Keaton Mitchell. Yeah, I don't think you have to have a medical degree to understand that the knee ain't supposed to bend that way, right? Clearly, that is not how the knee is supposed to go. Just really a brutal injury for an absolutely electric rookie last year in Keaton Mitchell. He was really starting to come on with the absence of J.K. Dobbins to that Achilles tear. Gus Edwards is kind of 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He was really kind of that dynamic back. And late in the season, unfortunately in December, he tore his ACL against Jacksonville Jaguars here on this play, when obviously ACL tore, and you see the knee is just buckled and absolutely unstable, went down after this. So unfortunately, he's only dealing with about 8.5 months of recovery timeline. I just talked about, if you are under 9 months, it is virtually impossible for a guy to return. I mean, I say that because, again, the re-injury risk is just the juice is not worth the squeeze. Your re-injury risk increases by an extraordinary amount. It is not worth the health of that player, the long-term health of that player. An ACL tear is something hard enough to come back from, right? It's not only the physical of, going through rehab and all this stuff, but it's also the psychological aspect of trusting your knee again, especially for players. I'm going to do everybody a favor. I'm going to take that off the screen. Especially for players like running backs and wide receivers who have to make cuts and trust their knee. That's hard. That is a hard thing to do. Anyone who's had an injury it's not only a humbling experience, but it's not just physical. It is a whole body experience. It is a whole life experience, right? Is that whole psychological aspect of, if I do this movement that got me injured, is my knee going to hold up? Because it didn't last time. So that is something I like to mention as well. Also, research has shown that it can take up to 2 years for normal movement to return. Right. So I'm not even just talking about the guy getting on the field. I'm talking about like getting back to where you were normally moving. We see it with guys all the time, whether it was Javonte Williams last year, really ACL, the year one post injury, you do see a decline in performance, especially with wide receivers and running backs in particular. Now, it is not all of them, right? We have our Adrian Peterson unicorn example. That's, again, I don't think we'll ever see that again. But Breece Hall, even last year, just as recent as last year, Breece Hall had a pretty damn good year coming off his ACL tear. Now, he did have more recovery time than Keaton Mitchell is going to have, and he is a very explosive player, similar to Mitchell. So, I cannot project on a baseline without seeing the rehab process, and with being so far out, I'm typically off wide receivers and running backs coming off year one of ACL, especially with not even 9 months to go. That being said, you want to kind of monitor how it is. But as far as for early season, first half of the season, definitely out on Mitchell here. I do not think he's going to be able to produce much, let alone like I'm expecting him to start on the pup. I think maybe week 8, week 9, we could see him getting back into the mix. But again, it takes time to get there. So right now, season outlook for Keaton Mitchell is not that great, unfortunately, for the explosive, now second-year player. All right, sticking with the Baltimore Ravens, we're going to go with another young guy whose career has just not been off to the start you want, and that is the defensive end, outside linebacker, David Ojabo. Man, this is just a tough story. So he tore his ACL last year, fairly early on as well, dealing with about 11 and a half months of recovery time before the start of the season. But it's not just tearing your ACL as the second year in the league, but it's coming off an Achilles tear as a rookie. For those that don't know or remember, David Ojabo coming out of Michigan on his pro day, actually, he tore his Achilles, it's just terrible. I mean, you're trying to show out, you're trying to like get you the contract of your life, you're trying to get drafted, you're trying to achieve your NFL dreams, and you go through your year and you have a great year and you go to put up these numbers, and man, to tear your Achilles, you just got to feel for that kid, and then to come back, make it back, and then to get and finally, get a clean slate for the season, and boom, ACL tear. So it just sucks. That absolutely sucks. Your heart goes out to a player like that. He's definitely got an uphill battle. Now, again, the little bit of the plus side is he does have 11 and a half months to come back from this injury. So that is on kind of the higher side. Maybe he's got a chance, but man, it's hard. He just hasn't played much, right? You're essentially going into your third year. You're a rookie, and you're coming off not only Achilles tear, but also an ACL tear on top of that. 2 injuries that are hard to come back from. And yeah, like an Achilles tear typically in year 2 isn't going to really have that huge of an impact. But when you're coming off an ACL tear, yeah, it is, right? Like these are 2 major, major, major injuries. And even if they're not on the same side, like there's just, as you're going through rehab, there is these muscle imbalances and your neurological pathways, your neuromuscular system. It takes time for that to catch up. And if you're coming off 2 major injuries, it's hard for me to be super hopeful with the Ojabo there. I mean, I think he's going to be fighting to really like be able to still be on the roster and get through his rookie contract. So I'm not expecting huge things out of Ojabo, wishing him well, but that is just Achilles tear to an ACL tear. That's brutal. That is a brutal luck of the draw there. All right, we got 2 more guys with ACLs. Again, ACLs, the hot topic, right? They are definitely ACLs. Achilles are some of your biggest major injuries that we're gonna see. They suck. but it happens. Unfortunate. Next guy is going to be, we're going to go over the Lurs. We're going to go over to Steel City and talk about a Pittsburgh Steeler. And we're talking about Cole Holcomb. Inside linebacker, came over from Washington. Actually was playing pretty damn well. He kind of solidified his starting spot there in the middle. And then in week 9 against Tennessee Titans on Thursday Night Football, he unfortunately got leg whipped, friendly fire from safety Keanu Neal. Totally incidental. Neal was going in on a tackle, got whipped around, and he basically hit Holcomb's knee. Now, this is an interesting one because the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, gotta love him, except as an injury person because he makes my life hell. Very similar to Bill Belichick, where they keep injuries very close to the vest. Like, there's still not been anything definitive saying like what kind of knee injury and surgery he has. Now, there was an article that came out recently that said that it was an ACL tear and he did have ACL surgery. What we do know is that he stayed in the hospital overnight as a precaution the night that it happened. So clearly they were monitoring something. They were really trying to probably worried about artery. You have a bunch of arteries and veins that obviously run through, but you have a major artery that runs through the back of the knee there. So with the knee kind of buckling and getting shifted that way, that is what I'm going to assume they were worried about as far as keeping him for overnight, but it was precautionary, so he was good to go there. But so we're going to kind of act under the premise that he had an ACL surgery, had an ACL tear, because that is kind of the information we have out there. There's also a rumor that he might retire right earlier this month, and this is just like in March, right? Earlier this month, there was something. Now, one of the local news stations, radio stations, was based off. They tried to interpret the GM's words and was talking about, is this going to be career ending for the soon to be 28-year-old? But a newer article came out and said that their outlook is more positive and that he's actively working to return. So some big question marks with Holcomb here, but acting under the premise that it was an ACL tear and it obviously the injury happened it did happen in week 9, so he is looking at 10 months of recovery time to come back from whether it's the ACL tear or whatever the hell surgery he did get, which isn't a ton of time. It's a good amount, but he might not be quite ready to start the season. He might there's a chance he's ready. He falls in that kind of 10 to 12 month window, typically closer to 11 months, but there's a chance he's able to come back. Now, really, I think as the season starts, we'll probably get a clear, definitive answer on exactly what the surgery was and kind of as he's coming back from the injury and stuff like that. They did sign inside linebacker Patrick Queen. However, there's 2 inside linebacker spots, and the Steelers really, they had Holcomb go down. They had Landon Roberts go down. They had Quan Alexander go down. They were really a ragtag group next year. So Queen adds that stability, and then hopefully Holcomb can come in and be ready to fill that hole because he was really playing well for this team. But again, coming off an ACL, you got to be a little bit worried there. So kind of cautiously optimistic for Holcomb. Hopefully it was just an ACL tear and an ACL tear alone, nothing crazy, but it's just ACLs are so tough. I'm thinking about Blake Martinez from my Giants and how he looked so good when we first got him, and then he tore that ACL in that next year and he just was not the same. I think he's on the couch like me and you right now. So definitely tough to be super optimistic with his ACL tears, but he's got a decent chance of making an impact next season. All right, we're going to round out the ACL and multi-ligament injuries with probably the most gruesome and worst one. Again, I'm not going to show you the gruesome injury if you probably already saw it, but if you really want to do that to yourself, I'll let you look it up on your own. I do not need another viewer discretion advised. Nick Chubb. Let's just say that obviously the rest of his body's here and his knee is still over there. Not supposed to be over there, right? So he suffered a brutal, gruesome, nasty knee injury where it required actually 2 surgeries. So he tore now when the play was, when we saw this play and looking at replays, it looked like everything in the knee was absolutely torn to shreds. Like this was a brutal looking injury, but apparently, when they actually went in for surgery, they were a little bit like kind of a little positively surprised. Like kind of it didn't look quite as bad according to the surgeon. Now, it was pretty bad because he did require 2 separate surgeries, which does happen. You will see that, sometimes, in an effort to avoid, too much scar tissue buildup, or whether it's just kinda too much for the knee, so a player will have 2 surgeries instead of having it all done at once. So he had a surgery to repair his MCL and his medial meniscus first, so it looks like he did have the unhappy triad there, and then the second surgery was just to repair the ACL. So Nick Chubb, 2 surgeries off this brutal knee injury. Only real positive is that it happened pretty early on in the season. I think it was either week 2 or 3. So he's got 11 and a half months of recovery timeline. But again, this is not just your typical ACL tear. So I would expect the recovery timeline to be closer to 12 to 15 months. So as far as him being ready for the start of the season, look, Nick Chubb, for those that don't know, when he played at the University of Georgia, which go Gators, we don't like the dogs around here, but he also suffered a pretty gnarly knee injury, and he worked his way back, and obviously worked his way to becoming one of the best running backs in the league. I mean, this dude, it's hard not to like this dude. He just runs so hard, and he's just like such a consistent back behind that offensive line. It's hard to want to bet against him, but he's just got such an uphill battle. Now, a lot of these situations too is, when we talk about fantasy and things like that, and betting markets and stuff, it's really, you kind of have to we have to get a sense of first, like, where's the market at on him? Is he a guy who's just going, I mean, I would not imagine he was going undrafted, but maybe he's going super late in the drafts, and there could be some value depending on, it's all about where you get him. Now, anywhere in the first like 4 rounds, really, for me, way too high. I can't do it with Nick Chubb this year. No, not. Typically, I'm a big Nick Chubb guy in fantasy. In the betting markets, he's just so consistent. But there's got to be a pretty big adjustment to the market for me to really be on the right side of that. So for now, I'm not too optimistic with Nick Chubb, just with it being that multi-ligament injury. And he does have about 11 and a half months of recovery, but it's really kind of let's see where the market is on Chubb. I'm pretty curious to see, how much of a correction it is, because sometimes you'll see with guys where it's almost like the boogeyman. They're like, oh my gosh, he's gonna, I'm gonna project him to have like 400 yards and be like a last round pick, and that's just too much. And then there's some value there. But now on the flip side, you can't just lower his yard total by 200 yards and expect him to really go out there and do the same things he's been doing. So it'll be very interesting to see where kind of not only Vegas and the betting markets, but also you and your buddies in the fantasy space where he starts to go. It's going to be very interesting there for Nick Chubb. All right, folks, we have made it through our first 5 players there. We just have 3 more to wrap it up. But before we do that, let me tell you about one of our sponsors, one of our partners here with IDP Plus, one of the people that are bringing this to your ears here, and that's Trophy Smack. Look, one of the best things about winning your fantasy league is being able to talk shit about it, right? Being able to show that, hey, whether you had a monetary prize or whatever your winning prize was, yep, that's great, that's dandy. But being able to tell your friends that I'm the top dog, I'm the alpha dog of this league, the league runs through me, and being able to talk shit. You know what helps with that? Having a nice big old trophy or championship belt that reminds people that this league is mine. I am the king or queen of this league, and Trophy Smack can help you do just that. They got all you need for fantasy football, whatever fantasy league you're in, whether you're doing baseball, hockey, all these other sports that to me aren't as important. But anyway, Trophy Smack's got it. No better way you can showcase your supremacy with that championship hardware from Trophy Smack. They got everything you can need. And don't worry, I'm not just telling you about them just to tell you about them. Of course, I'm going to give you something free. Of course, that's what we do here over at IDP, guys. So with the purchase of a belt or trophy, you will get a free ring with promo code IDP Guys. All one word, all caps, no space, IDP Guys. Again, use promo code IDP Guys, and with the purchase of a trophy or a belt, you will get a free ring. You will get some free ring bling to help you on checkout. So go ahead and use that promo code. Check out those guys over at Trophy Smack. All right, back to the action here. We got 3 more injuries to wrap up here for the AFC North, and we are headed back to Baltimore. Before we do that, so we got 3 injuries left, and 3 different injuries. So at least we get something different than an ACL tear to keep it a little spicy. So this one is we're going to be talking about Mark Andrews, and it is a high ankle sprain with a fibula fracture. All right, so what is a high ankle sprain? What is your high ankle? So your high ankle is just kind of the ligaments above your ankle, right? Above what you would traditionally think your ankle. It's the syndesmosis, which is the connective tissue between your fibula and your tibia, which are your 2 lower leg bones. You kind of see where that big red space is. Those ligaments, they kind of run all up and down that. That's your high ankle. Now, unlike a typical low ankle sprain, when you think of like I rolled my ankle at the basketball court and the ankle goes out, this time usually the foot is planted and there's kind of a rotational force, and the force usually kind of takes that ankle inward, and there's you can kind of see as that rotation there. But yeah, usually it happens when the foot's planted and someone falls on that leg. That's when you'll get your high ankle. Now, high ankle sprain is just when those ligaments are damaged. What can happen when a really bad case is not only those ligaments will get damaged between those 2 bones, but there'll be so much force that gets exerted onto those ligaments that it'll actually fracture that outside leg bone, that fibula, that'll actually be fractured. And that is what happened here with Mr. Mark Andrews. As you can see, I mean, the injury hurt around the world, right? Because we had a new rule, the hip tackle that got Mark Andrews down and caused this injury is now banned in the NFL. I have no idea how the hell they're going to officiate that. I mean, I'm already getting upset at a call that hasn't even happened yet. I mean, I really don't know how that's going to go. I mean, I'm all for player safety. That's great, but at what expense is really the question. But off topic, Mark Andrews, this one should be pretty easy. I mean, I just threw him in here just to kind of help reassure people, Ravens fans or people thinking about the future. Like this is only really about a 2 to 3, maybe 4 month injury. He came back around 2.5 months. So he came back on a little bit on the early side. He was only able to play in the one AFC championship game. And, he wasn't super effective because he wasn't all the way healed, which if you were following them and stuff, and that's kind of what the expectation was, is that, hey, he's mostly going to be a decoy out there. You might catch a couple balls, but nothing too crazy. And that's kind of what we got from him. But he does have 9.5 months until week 1. He will be good to go. You do not have to be worried about Mark Andrews. He's going to go back to being one of the premier targets for Lamar Jackson. I actually think people are sleeping on him this next year. I'm pretty excited to load up on some Mark Andrews, especially, you got King Henry, you got Lamar Jackson. That offense is going to be pretty fun. It's going to be interesting to see how they use him. I mean, the offense was pretty dynamic with Zay Flowers when Andrews was not there and to be the number 1. So it's classic. If it's the regular season, give me the Ravens. When it gets to playoffs, we might have to have a different discussion. All right. Heading over back to Cleveland, the land. Let's talk about a shoulder fracture here. Obviously, pretty broad term. Obviously, here's your shoulder. It's a pretty, simple model. You got your it's a ball and socket joint, right? So you have your humerus, which is kind of your ball. It's your arm bone here. It has the ball. And then that socket is your glenoid, which is attached to your scapula. So the glenoid is a bone, and if there's a bone, you can fracture that bone. And that's what happened to Deshaun Jackson on his throwing, or not Deshaun Jackson, Deshaun Watson, the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, not the former wide receiver who made my life miserable as a Giants fan for that terrible punt return. I digress. Deshaun Watson, he injured his throwing shoulder, and it wound up being a fracture in the glenoid. The team was concerned about it enough that they didn't want to risk letting it heal on their own. They wanted to have surgery to make sure that heals properly. Again, they spent $1 bajillion on Watson just for him to not play and take all their money. But hey, they want to try to protect their asset. So as far as the injury itself, typically a 4 to 6 week recovery timeline. Watson will have plenty of time. He's got 9.5 months until the start of the season from when he got injured. As from an injury standpoint, Watson should be good. Now, this was to his throwing shoulder, so how much is that going to affect his throwing motion? I think he should be able to work through that, with the offseason and being able to be cleared and being able to start throwing, probably by OTAs or, definitely by training camp. But for me, it's less about the injury and it's more about the individual. I mean, the dude is just not about playing football. Like whether it's for injury or whether it's for whatever, what we all know the situation, we'll call it, whether it's for injury or whether it's for pleasure. The dude just does not seem to want to play football. He's played 12 games in the last 3 seasons. 12 games in the last 3 seasons. So not even a full season worth of games in the last 3. I mean, last I check, one way to make sure you don't get better at playing football is to not play football. Like, you do not see players take a year off, a la Le'Veon Bell, a la Deshaun Watson, and just light it up and come back and be better or be the same level they were. That is not how that works. So I am not super optimistic about Deshaun Watson. Now, I've not been optimistic about him since the whole incident, as far as just, and it's obviously from a moral standpoint, but it's more so from the standpoint of, if you take a year off of playing football at a professional level with live reps, you are not going to get better. Like, that is very hard to do and come back and perform at the highest level as a quarterback in the National Football League. So I'm from an injury standpoint, yeah, sure, he'll be healthy, but I'm not super if I was them, I think Flacco gives them a better chance to win. But hey, you spent $1 bajillion on him, so now you got to deal with having to play him. All right, folks, we are moving on to our last injury of the day, last injury of this AFC North, and that is a wrist tendon or a wrist ligament tear. Now, you probably know where this is going. This is for Mr. Joe Cool. So there was a decent amount of what exactly is he dealing with? Some questions as far as what ligament what ligament he did actually tear. There was a report that came out recently that said it was actually the scapholunate ligament, which is in between two of your carpal bones, your scaphoid and your lunate. Your scaphoid is underneath the thumb there, and your lunate's kind of in the middle of your hand there. So yeah, it's just a ligament that connects the two. It helps to stabilize the wrist. I don't think we need to get into the nitty gritty of anything behind that, as far as it's one of the ligaments in your wrist, and obviously you need it to be able to throw the football. So the nice news here is the recovery timeline is typically 4 to 6 months after surgery. Joe Burrow has 9.5 months until week 1. So this is not going to hopefully be our lasting image in our minds once week 1 rolls around. Joe Burrow has said that he should be good to go to start throwing and be cleared in May, or fully cleared for contact in May, and then he's going to start throwing by OTAs. So we're going to be able to tell pretty early and often if he's back to where he is. But the expectation is that he's going to be back, and he's going to be back to being Joe Burrow. There's not really a huge kind of high re-injury rate or risk or kind of concern that this is really going to take in and track into next season. Really, the concern is that it seems like at the start of the season, the Bengals and Joe Burrow can just not start healthy or good. He came in with that calf injury. It just always seems to be something to start the year, and then it kind of leads to them starting off slow. So from the wrist tendon injury standpoint, Burrow should be good. We're going to definitely know he's going to be able to start throwing sooner than later. So that's going to give us a really good indication on where he's at. But the expectation right now is that Joe Burrow is going to be good to go. He should be back to his, take nearly Super Bowl winning ways, just one game short. So I think Joe Burrow, I'm pretty positive on his outlook there. All right, folks, we just went through 8 of the biggest injuries in the AFC North. Hey, if you've got injuries that you're thinking of, or something in this division, like, hey, I've got a question about this, go ahead and leave a comment for me. I would be happy to whether make it short or just give you a kind of a quick answer there. If you want to reach out to me on social, whether it's TikTok or X, at the DGen Doc, you can find me there. Just hit me up with a question. Absolutely, I'll help you guys out, especially in the off season. Got nothing but time. Love talking ball there. So we're going to do a really quick recap, really quick summary to kind of wrap up the last 35 minutes or so of what I was talking about. So these are your players with your ACL tear. So we had Jack Conklin, ACL, MCL tear. Due to his recovery time, looks like he should be good to go for the start of the season. Keaton Mitchell, not a lot of recovery time, so I would not expect him ready to go to start the season. Ojabo, he has a chance to be ready, but it's hard to trust him coming off an Achilles tear and an ACL tear. Cole Holcomb, there's a lot of questions as far as exactly what was going on here. There was thoughts about he potentially could retire. It does not seem like that's going to happen, but I think, about maybe week 4, week 5, he should be a contributor for this team. And then Nick Chubb with that gruesome injury, he's got 11 and a half months to start a season, but I cannot be fully faithful and trusting in a running back coming off this big of an injury in the year one. So depending on where the market is on Nick Chubb, I'm likely going to be below market on him. Mark Andrews should be good to go. We already saw him in the playoffs. Obviously, he wasn't even close to 100%, but by the start of next season, he will be. Deshaun Watson, injury perspective, he should be good to go. The guy just never seems to be on the field. Again, 12 games in the past 3 years, so I'm out on Deshaun Watson, less so for injury and more so for availability reasons. And Joe Burrow, Mr. Cool, he also should be good to go based on the injury. Only 4 to 6 week expected recovery timeline. He's got 9.5 weeks to start the season, so I do think he should be good to go. Definitely feel pretty good about Burrow there. All right, folks. That is it for your AFC North injuries. I will be back next week, likely continuing with AFC. So that's either going to be AFC South or AFC West. We'll see. We'll just kind of bounce around the map there. So we'll finish the AFC. And then, of course, don't worry, we'll be moving to the NFC. Again, guys, new series. Would appreciate a like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to IDP Plus. We're talking betting. We're talking IDP. We're talking fantasy football. Anything with football, we've got it. Offense, defense, linemen. You don't see that a lot. You just see these companies stick to the sexy, I'm going to talk about, just the offensive guys and just the blah, blah, blah. No, football is a holistic game. Hey, if a kicker's got a big enough injury, I will talk about it because it matters to football. It is a 11 men on that field, 53-man roster. That's enough rambling on. The whiskey's starting to really take effect there, guys. So I enjoyed talking ball. I hope you enjoyed it too. This was the AFC North 2024 NFL Injury Outlook, and this is the Doc signing off.